welcome to StoryHive On Location, Calgary. I'm your host, Nicolas, and I'm thrilled to bring you a new episode produced with the support of TELUS STORYHIve. Stay tuned, because I can't wait to show you what comes next here in the beautiful city of Calgary. Today, I am joined by Kelly Kaur. Kelly is an author based here in Calgary, Alberta. Kelly, how have you been?
I'm wonderful. It's a wonderful day. I'm so happy there's no snow out there.
Yeah.
So I am ready to hang out with you and chat.
I'm excited to hear all your stories, to hear your journey. And I wanted to ask you, if you weren't an author, what would you be doing right now?
Yes. One thing I always wanted to be, ready or not, was to be a lawyer.
A lawyer?
Yes.
Okay.
But I grew up in Singapore, and the circumstances of my life made me believe that that was not a possibility. So I didn't get the grades to get into law school. But you know what? It's never too late.
But it still involves a lot of reading comprehension when you're working in law.
Absolutely.
You gotta understand them and everything.
Yes, I love those law shows, right? So I'm always defending myself and people's rights. So in my mind, I am a lawyer. So if you need free law advice, let me know.
No, that's great. And I can still see the skills that you applied to literature being useful in law.
Absolutely. You know, it's the articulation, the argumentation, and the art of speaking. So I think with writing, it is the same idea because it's very comprehensive stuff. So every word counts. And of course, in law, you know, it's more boring because it's legal stuff. But writing, you have a chance to be creative.
But you still have to use a very careful choice of words when you're a lawyer. When you're explaining your case to the jury.
Yes.
That's when it comes in handy.
Absolutely, especially when you stand to lose the case. You realize every word will count, so you're right.
Exactly, and I feel it's a skill that people just don't value as much as they used to. Because when we talk about presenting, and we talk about talking, and we talk about communicating, a lot of words come to mind that are called fillers. And you'll see me doing fillers during this interview. Maybe you'll do fillers as well. I don't think so. I think you'll do less than me. But fillers are words like and, so, and it just comes to show how limited the vocabulary that we use nowadays is compared to before.
Right, you bring up two important points. One is word choice as a writer. I think that is very important to have the words come out that mean something. So you don't say skinny or thin or slim or slender. You actually have a choice to choose the words. And as far as ums and ahs, luckily I'm a trained Toastmasters. I've been in Toastmasters, and do you know that's one of the things they check? We literally count how many ums and ahs, and I'm so grateful that I've been a Toastmaster all this while and have had many opportunities to practice the skill of speaking, which also includes the skill of choosing words.
I wanted to ask you, when you're not working in literature, where can we find you?
Lately, I've been running away a lot. So just 3 weeks ago, I was in London, Paris, and St. Malo.
Wow.
And I was invited to a book club in London. And I said, I'll be there. So I jumped on the plane and I arrived at this beautiful house just outside of London in Winchester. 9 amazing women who had read my novel, Letters to Singapore, and they wanted to talk to me about it. It was a beautiful moment. And before that, in July, for 7 weeks, I went to Singapore, Thailand, and Bangkok. My mummy is in Singapore, so every year I go and harass her. I hang out with her and I eat Singapore food. I meet my brother, my niece, my sister. So it's a family thingamajig. And I've done that for decades now. So I'm very lucky I have that opportunity to travel. So I need to find more money so I can travel more.
She must be very happy to have you back home and be able to make you childhood meals again. Yeah.
Yes, roti and dal. And I want something simple, or the Singapore food. If you're ready to come to Singapore with me, chicken rice, nasi lemak, soup, laksa, it just goes on. And you are never going to complain. And it's pretty reasonable too at the outdoor hawker centers.
Yeah, I've heard about Singapore a lot. I've seen
Yep.
pictures, I've seen news. Very, very unique place.
Right,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Just don't chew gum and, you know, vandalize cars and you'll be okay.
I think that's pretty reasonable ask.
Reasonable, yes.
Moving on from Singapore and from all of these topics, I wanted to ask you, when you went to London, how did it feel to get a call? How did it feel to get a call from this group of women halfway across the world asking about your book?
I was stunned. I was shocked because this novel came out in 2022. And when I wrote Letters to Singapore, it is about a Singaporean who comes to the University of Calgary. So she's a young newcomer and she writes letters home to her mother, her sister, her Chinese friend, and South Indian friend. So when I wrote this book, it's like you're reading letters between these women and their secrets uncover. And I thought, well, who's going to read my book? So these women were delighted at the stories, at the themes, at the ideas of women's lives, emancipation, the challenges they went through. When they invited me over and the conversation began, I am always intrigued by what they're going to ask me. And they were curious about the character, about her experiences, the life of a young Indian woman, the life of a Singaporean. So I think no matter where we are from, whether we are from England or Indonesia or Australia, I think the themes of lives lived, of joy, of happiness, of grief, they are universal. And that's what connected us. And in that room, in that living room, eating cake and drinking tea and having the 8 women chat with me about my book and their lives, it just became such a connecting moment. And then this moment repeated just a few days ago on Wednesday. I had another group of women invite me to their book club in Calgary, and 18 of them showed up. And the same wonderful thing, they were curious. They had similar stories and they found connections. So whenever there's a book club and people ask me questions, I'm so intrigued. I never know what they're going to ask, because when you write a book, you write stories. When someone reads your book, they make connections with your stories and then it becomes their stories. So they'll ask me questions and some of them are really strange and some of them are amazing. And I always sit back and say, that's the reader response theory, right? Where you connect and you live the experiences. And that's why we read. We read books so that we can delve into people's lives.
We're curious. We love gossip.
Absolutely. And you get to read letters, right? So the whole novel is based on just letters. And I always love to kind of eavesdrops on people's conversation or wonder what's written in that letter. So this is legit. You can do it without getting into trouble.
I also had a question. You brought up this experience of being there with a group of women, being there with people who have read your book from
Right.
all diverse backgrounds.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, were there any questions you hadn't thought about when writing the book? Because I've noticed sometimes when you write, whether it's a script, a book, a poem, you write it from a certain perspective, your perspective. And when you put it out to the world, the readers, they bring their own perspectives along. And with their own perspectives comes detail that you haven't picked up on from your perspective. So were there any of those questions? Is there a question that really stood out to you from this group of women when they were reading your book and when they were asking you about it?
All the time. The
Yeah.
first question is they want to know if this is the story of my life. And they're curious if this is about me. And when I first started writing, I was nervous that people were going to think that. Of course, there are bits and pieces of experiences and things that have happened to me that also happened to the character Simran. And I think that people assume that it must be me. So I have people who insist that this is your life, Kelly. I said, no, it's not. I said, it's here and there, and they argue with me. And there are people who say, did this really happen with the professors? And then they will say, it happened to me also. This happened in my lifetime during my experiences at university. So the questions they ask either come from connecting, curiosity, or just wanting to know, spill the beans, woman. They want to know exactly what happened to me. So I'll never tell.
Sometimes when I write scripts, when I put them to film, I'll get questions from the audience that I hadn't thought about, that I don't have answers for.
Right.
How do you manage those moments? How do you manage moments when some readers have been focused so much on different aspects of the book that you might have not lent your focus to, and then their focus turns into questions, and then it's just questions that you hadn't thought about at all? How do you manage that?
I enjoy that because I'm a great debater. I love to argue. So one of the questions that actually came out that was interesting, challenging, was, are all Indian women in this situation? And of course, it's not, right? It depends. So the question is, it depends. Whether the family is very strict, very traditional, very modern, then the stories within each family is different. So I was a bit interested in thinking that some people felt that this, let's say, arranged marriage represented all Indian girls or all Indian women. And I think it's a good question to ask, because that's where you learn and you understand and you realize, so that when you look at people, you don't make assumptions. It's the same for me when I look at the Western world or a Caucasian woman. I said, oh, love marriage. This must be amazing. And they go, well, all stories are different. So I think the difficult questions always make me stop, think, and then think out loud, speak my truth. And then that's where the communication and the interchange happens. And that's when it is the best book club questions, right? Because then they're asking questions, I'm answering, I'm asking questions, they're talking, and then you realize, hey, that's a whole new novel that could come out of this.
How did the different groups of readers compare? You mentioned that there was a book club in London, and that there was a book club you attended in Calgary.
Right.
So the London readers, they have no idea about Calgary. They must only know about it through maps, pictures, and videos.
Correct.
Whereas the Calgary group, they've lived it.
Yes.
So how did their questions compare? How did their experiences compare? Were there some things that the Calgary group picked up on that people in Britain didn't pick up on?
Great question. The Calgary group loved all the places they could recognize. I talk about Kensington, the Roastery, the coffee shop. It's still there over 30 years later. I talk about the 1988 Winter Olympics.
Right.
And Electric Avenue. So the Calgary Canadian readers were excited. They said, that's me, I've been there, I know where this is. And I feel the same when I read a novel or watch a movie and I can recognize the places. I get excited, right? I feel that extra connection.
Have you ever seen the movie Cool Runnings?
Yes.
Yeah, it takes place here.
Yes.
1988 Olympics.
And the irony is, I went to Jamaica. I went to the exact pub where they had all the replica of all the Jamaican sleds and the photographs. Wow. And it was a blast from the past. As I'm sitting there in the bar watching Cool Runnings, I'm like, I was there. That was me. This is bizarre. Where am I? So I think that connection is so unique.
Yeah, they definitely bring their own lived-in experiences to it, and it's that excitement. You're right. It's that excitement to seeing the places you grew up in be captured. And it's a deeper level of connection that brings that.
I think it also then just punctuates your existence, right? You
Right.
say, I've been to Kensington, I've been to the Bow River, I went to University of Calgary, and then you reflect on your own history and background, and it becomes interesting that this book and this author that you don't know is now mentioning things that you do know about. So I'm finding all the connections and threads really very cool. It's fun. It's challenging because some writers say you have to write about famous places, right? New York or Toronto, Calgary is not important enough. But to me, it is important. I've been here for so long. This place is my place. And I'm so proud and happy to talk about Calgary, the Rocky Mountains, going to Banff, skiing. These are all stories that define many of us.
Exactly. Yeah, it's always a thrill to hear about Calgary, beyond Alberta, beyond Canada.
Exactly.
See it be recognized.
Right.
You're right, it's that impact in our lives that the place has had and how now it's connected to other places.
And based on that, I have a Calgary reader. She read my book and she wanted to go to Singapore. So she and her daughter went to Singapore this year and they absolutely love it. They're going back again.
Wow.
Because I mentioned places there and they decided that they were going to explore it. Now, I didn't even think of that as a possibility. So, hey, tourist guide, led us to Singapore.
You talked about how there's this advice that goes around writers where if you want to write a place, you have to make sure it's a famous place. I want to know, when he came to writing about Calgary, Calgary is famous to a lot of us, How did you choose what settings to portray in your book? What settings to showcase?
It was easy because I didn't know what I was going to do. I'm a new writer. And when I had this opportunity to be in a mentorship program under Aretha Van Herk, I had really 3 months to come up with this proposal. So I chose letters, which I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
I decided to write, which I really don't know much about. I have my master's in English. I sometimes teach literature courses. I've read many books. So I thought I knew something, but when it actually came to writing, I didn't know where to start, what to do. So then I always remember people say, write about what you know, correct?
Yeah.
So I know Calgary. I know about a Singaporean girl. I know about stories from Singapore. I know about stories in Calgary. So that's where I have the bits and pieces that I can weave into the story. And Calgary, why would I not write about Calgary, right? It inspires me. I always say I will start writing when I find that house in Canmore overlooking the mountains and I can write every day. So people always joke with me, so that's your excuse, because obviously you won't be able to afford that house in Canmore overlooking the mountains. I said, I know, it's been 25 years. So write what you know, write what you're comfortable with. And if it's fiction, there are many stories that don't even name the place, right? It's a fictional place. So that's the joy of being an author. You can make things up.
Write what you know, write with what you're comfortable about. And I think the third one should be write right now.
Exactly. I like that. We're going to get a t-shirt.
I wanted to ask you, having been here in Calgary for so long and observed the different changes throughout the city, how has the city changed over time? I believe the book takes place, it's not contemporary, right?
1985 to 1988.
Right. So it's a different Calgary that you're writing about.
Right.
How does it compare to modern Calgary?
Goodness, I know when I was going to come to Calgary, my father said, why are you going there? What's there? It's so cold. You're going to die. And we had no notion of Canada, or only the idea of it snows. So when I first came to Calgary, I was shocked because Singapore is more vibrant and more of a city than Calgary was when I came. Now it's almost equal, but over the years, I have seen so many changes. I would drive to places. Hawkwood never existed, and then I ended up living there. It was just farm. And wherever you drive today, you see houses being built, and you go, where did they come from? These were just open land years ago that have been developed, and rightly so. And of course, the population has doubled, tripled, and more people have come in. And I think the whole sense of Calgary changing its flavor as well. It's always be a beautiful cowboy, cowgirl town, but we have many immigrants who come to and give to the city. So in terms of change, I think that there has been some positive changes like growth and people, values, and there also have been challenges like homelessness and more crime happening and people trying to fit in. So I've been here so long that I see that. And one small example is the University of Calgary. I went to the University of Calgary. Now when I go there, I can't believe how many buildings they've crammed into it. It used to be much more open, and now it's so stacked in with buildings, and it's a different flavor. But I always remember the University of Calgary that I went to, and that is also reflected in this novel.
Right. Who knows how it's going to change in the future?
Correct.
Calgary, they say it has two seasons, winter and construction.
Right. I do feel sad for places like Marda-Loop that's always under construction.
Yeah.
Yes, it's quite the challenge.
We've talked about Calgary a lot. I want to move the conversation across the world back to Singapore.
Singapore, let's go.
So how have readers reacted from Singapore? Have you got any feedback from people in Singapore reading your book?
One of the things that I've been surprised by and about is that my book has traveled quite a bit. And when it launched in 2022, the four of us with Stonehouse Publishing, we went to Regina, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Calgary. And then I was very lucky. I managed to launch my novel in Bali, Ubud, in Indonesia in 2022. It is the big writers and readers festival that's happening right now. And I used to look at it and go, I wish one day. And that one day happened for me in 2022. I had a 1-hour session where I launched my novel, and there were over 30 people in the room from all over the world. So just based on that opportunity, I have my book read by people in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Indonesia, in India, and then I have family around the world too. I have nieces in Melbourne, Australia, in England, and my sisters in Indonesia, my family's in Singapore, my friends. So the book has been circulating in ways that sometimes I can't even imagine. And in Calgary too, around Canada. And I always say, I'm delighted when someone picks my book. And I always say, tell me what you think or ask me any question. Because when I wrote the book, I did not know where it would go. And one of the places it's going to go to is to the moon.
Wow.
And it was supposed to go in December. With those NASA spaceships, it's now going to go in 2026. And I already have a poem that has landed on the moon. It was part of the Lunar Codex, where this organizer, Samuel Peralta from Toronto, decided he would take writers, musicians, artists from all around the world and preserve them forever on the moon. Microfiche, nanofiche, he put all the works in there, and there are so many of them that have landed on the moon. So when my poem about Singapore, a Singaporean's love affair, finally landed on the moon, I think last year, I cannot even believe it. When I wrote and I wanted to become a writer, I couldn't even imagine one person reading it. And now it's going to be in the moon forever as part of the UNESCO heritage site. So I am so lucky, so grateful that it has happened and people are reading my work.
You said that you studied at the University of Calgary English literature.
Right.
How did that transition go from growing up in Singapore, from being taught literature from Singapore, to now literature in English? We talked about the different cultures, different words that are lost in translation, different emotions. So how did the literature in Singapore compare to the literature here in Canada, here in English?
So in Singapore, it was a British occupied country. So most of the literature was British literature.
Okay, yeah, of course, yeah, makes sense.
Great Expectations and Charles Dickens, and our education was in English, and our exams were marked in England. It was the O level and the A level, so they're very similar to the British exams. But most of the books and literature we read were mostly based on that set of British ideas and countries. The only one that was different was Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart.
I read that one. Yeah, from high school.
Amazing. And I was so shocked that other people wrote books. I thought only white people wrote books. Wow. And so when I came to Calgary to do my degrees in my BA and my master's, of course, it was wonderful because I could take post-colonial literature. I, of course, had to take British, American, Canadian. I had a choice, but it just opened up my world to literature from Australia, Africa, China, and the list never ends. People still ask me, have you read this book? Have you read that book? And I have not, because there are so many to read. And I think that what I loved most was the post-colonial literature written by people in India, all written in English, by people in Australia, by people in Africa. So I got familiar with those writers. And what I loved most about their stories were, some of them were about people like me. So Anita Desai, she is half Indian and half German, and her stories are about unhappy women trapped in marriages in India. And I thought, I recognize some of these. You know, she's the grandmother, wears a sari, just like people I know back home. So that's when I realized the power of literature. Of course, I love Shakespeare and Dickens and all the classics, but I also love the other options.
That mention about Things Fall Apart took me back to high school.
Yeah, Chinua Achebe, remember the locusts?
Yeah, I remember Okonkwo
and his wives.
and his wives.
On all the little houses, huts of all his wives out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting, that whole story and how it goes down. Yeah, it's just such a nostalgic moment for me, talking about Things Fall Apart.
Me too. I was 16 when I read that book, and it still stays with me. And you said similar, and I can see it in my mind's eye, right? A Congo, a palm climbing up the tree.
Yeah.
And that's what is so intriguing. I've never been to that part of the world, but to see it when it was written then, and it's just so connecting.
What I imagine your readers in Britain must have felt like.
Exactly.
Reading about Calgary.
And still finding similarities in how women are treated around the world. The stories about women and how they go through love and marriage and grief and arranged marriages, and some the British women were familiar with and some they were not. But that connecting idea of women. Women have voices that have to be heard.
I didn't know that in Singapore it was so strict about reading British literature, that it was so limiting. But now that you mentioned about it being a colonial
British school system.
yes, now it all makes sense.
Yeah, O levels. It was all connected.
In Colombia, what I meant from that question, asking you about Singapore literature, Colombian literature, we have to read it in school. Even back when I went to school, when I was 9 years old, there's a certain curriculum that you have to read. Starting out for children's literature, we've got our own poet over there called Rafael Pombo. He lived in Bogota, in the capital.
Wow.
You can visit his house.
Oh,
And he
I
wrote poetry for children.
I love it.
And then moving on, once you get older, you start reading Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which is also very impactful
World
Colombian
famous.
author.
Correct.
Yeah. And then afterwards, we still read, even though we haven't been part of Spain for 200 years, we still read Don Quixote.
Okay, the classics, right?
Yes. But yeah, it didn't click into my mind until you told me about the British roots and everything.
Right. And I think today, obviously, when I see the high school books and the university books people can choose, and the courses and the classes, there's so much variety. And there are many Calgary writers as well. We are all drawn to big names or people who win bestsellers or Pulitzer prizes, but there are writers who are amazing in Canada as well.
Right. Yeah. Now that it's no longer a British colony, have you seen more writers from Singapore? Has it developed more of its own unique style?
Singapore is trying its best to promote Singapore literature. So whenever I go back, right now in Singapore, the Singapore Writers Festival is going on. And they have writing competitions, they have writing contests, they have Singapore authors that they're trying to promote. They have poetry and words written on MRT and buses. So they are definitely trying to promote it. But many Singaporeans may or may not read. They do enjoy the supernatural stories. They love the graphic comics. And I say, whatever you read is better than not reading. If there are ghost stories you love, read them. Because reading is an art that you cultivate. And if you read one, maybe you go to the bookstore or the library and said, oh, how about this? When I was growing up in Singapore, the National Library was my sanctuary. Every 3 days I would go and I would just touch all the books. And I would read P.G. Wodehouse, mostly British literature. I grew up on Enid Blyton. She wrote The Famous Five and The Secret Seven. Oh, I love them. And Thomas and Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. I would just go to the library and anyone mentioned a book, I would just take it home. And it became such a beautiful refuge and escape from my life, right? When you are stuck in your small world, reading takes you anywhere and everywhere. And I just remember being so happy reading.
I wanted to talk about your teaching career. You teach at MRU,
Right.
you're a professor there.
Right.
You have all of this passion for literature. How do you get your students encouraged? How do you share that passion with them?
I think it started when I came as a university student. So when I think about it, I've been in school all my life. From grade 1 to now, all I've done is either be a student, be a teacher, be a university instructor, and I probably die in the classroom as well. So that's very intriguing. And my passion comes from the fact that when I first came to the University of Calgary as an immigrant from Singapore to Canada, I faced many challenges. I thought I was a great writer. I was a teacher back home. I had won debating contests. I had won literature prizes. And then I came to the University of Calgary and I found that I had to find my way to be a writer in Canada. And some parts of that is captured in the novel as well. And I think many immigrants feel that when they come here, you're an A student there, and then you come here and you have to recreate. I know Spanish like you would, not me, but if you know Spanish and you got A in Spanish, then you should get an A in English or not, right? So that transition. And I think that passion for me comes from sharing my experiences and making sure that people have the foundation for writing. I mean, it's ironic. From a different country, I came here, colonial British, I come to Canada, I struggle with school, trying to find out how to write those A papers. Now I teach university students who struggle to find out how to get A papers done. And when I build that foundation, so I go to the basics, how to write an essay, how to put in a thesis statement, how to put in punctuation, how to read a secondary source, an essay, and do a rhetorical analysis, how to write a research paper. It may be boring, but to me, I feel so passionate about it. Because when I learn to write, when I see my students learn to write, it is the foundation for them to take other classes, other courses, and to find their writing journeys. And even now, I've been teaching for 35 years. I get emails, and I love those emails from students who are doctors, lawyers, social workers, writers in public relation, and they say, I remember your class, or I really enjoyed being a stronger writer. I use those skills in my work today, and I understand because I do the same. So I think writing is a journey. I can give them the foundation, and I can give them the bus pass to continue on developing their own style. So my passion comes from knowing how difficult it was, going through the journey, sharing it, and empowering them and myself.
Guiding them to the destination.
Absolutely, because I am on this path that never stops. I have to guide myself too. I have to write my next book. What am I going to do? How is it going to unfold? So when I tell them writing is fun and challenging, I know.
You wrote this children's book that you've got placed right there.
Right.
How did that come about? How did you stumble upon this story? What was the journey like?
So How Do You Sing, Harry is put out by Red Barn, by Aisha Clough, and she wants to promote the underrepresented. So her first book is about a black cowboy in Calgary, John Ware. And the second book that I was an editor for is Florence Ledoux, a woman who was part of creating the Calgary Stampede.
Okay.
So when we were working together, I said, what's your next book? And she said, I don't know, maybe an Indian person. And I said, how about Sikh? Because I'm a Sikh person. And she said, okay, go and do your homework and tell me who you want to write on and about. So I went home, and thanks to Google the God, I managed to find 2 or 3 interesting names of people who had come to Calgary, and I was drawn to this one. He has green eyes like my father. So, an incredible story, and he still has family in Calgary, and his great-grandson just turned 100 years old in BC, Harchet Singh, and has a copy of my book and has shared this book with his family members. So the legacy.
Great-grandson, you said.
Great-grandson. So his son, his grandson? I get mixed up with all the.
So his son's
100 years
his
old.
son's
Must
is
be
his grandfather.
grandson.
Grandson.
Yes, his son's son,
Okay.
Harchet Singh.
Does he have any memories?
Yes.
Yes?
Harchet, the grandfather, of course, Harchet Singh, of course, knows. And the story is, and his family have reached out to me. His great-granddaughter, Cam, helped me with some of the stories. And rest her soul, she died a year ago, unfortunately, before the book came out. But her sons were very excited to see the book and the idea that their mother had shared their story with me. They sell Alberta whiskey cake, so they're quite well known. They've carried on their mother's legacy. And I met his great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren who reached out to me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and said, we read the story, we're so proud of this heritage and legacy. Thank you for sharing. And it was just so heartwarming that one story has made a difference. And for me, to have a man with a turban, right? A man with a turban in a children's book, that doesn't happen often. I know because I went to Indigo and I looked at all the children's books, and there were not many that were representative or that represented. And I wanted children to know that we're all different. We are the same, but we reflect our background, our cultures, the countries we come from, whether we're born here. We are Canadians. We are important. And this story proves that, because the motto of this story is nothing is impossible. And he came all the way from India with nothing and left a millionaire. So that's the Canadian dream, the immigrant dream, the human quest, the hero's quest.
The hero's journey.
To reinvent themselves. So I think this children's book has those messages. And I read it on the library website. So if you want to read the book, just Google the library, Kelly Kaur, this book. And over 1,000 children listened in on April 1st. It was the Alberta Sikh Heritage Day. And I read the book to them. And they asked brilliant questions, these young kids. And one said, can you write more books about people like us? And I was startled, right? That was exactly what I was hoping for, that people will see themselves in any books. So we need representation. We need more Colombian children in books, and Asian children, children from everywhere in the world who come to Canada, for example, so that people see that this is who I see in my classroom. This is the Canadian face, and we all belong.
I wanted to ask you more about Singh Hari. What did he do here in Calgary, without spoiling the book?
Right.
What's his connection to it?
His name is Harnam Singh Hari. It was too long, so they shortened it. Harnam Singh Hari came in 1908.
Okay.
And he had heard about Canada, and he was a farmer. He wanted to come to farmland. So it was very challenging for him to come. At that time, immigration into Canada was almost non-existent. So he took a ship, he left his family, took a ship months and months to go into Hong Kong, San Francisco, and then come to Calgary.
No planes back then.
Exactly. But at that point in San Francisco, you had to be allowed to get off the ship. So the ship is full of people from India, and only 4 people were allowed off the ship. And Harnam Singh Hari was not one of them. And he stood up. He could speak broken English a little bit, mostly Punjabi. And he spoke to the immigration officer, who was half Indian, half British. He was Eurasian. And pleaded with him to let him off, because Harnam Singh Hari served in the British Army as well. He says, I'm an officer, I've come here, I have my passion. And he didn't stop until the immigration officer said, all right, fine. So only 5 people allowed off the ship. The rest were sent back. So that was the idea of immigration. And here's this man, nothing is impossible. And from just getting into Canada, every part of his life was filled with challenges and struggles, all of which he overcame. And when he came into Calgary, there's a Singh Hari Park in Haysboro. It's a beautiful park. So if you go there and you see Hari Singh Park, know that it is this wonderful man. And he ended up owning land right up to Chinook. Chinook Center, all that land he owned. And when he left, he sold everything and was a millionaire, and he went back to India. I think that this man is an example of any Canadian spirit, the immigrant ideal of wanting to give and take, right? They come here, we come here, we do our best, Canada gives us our best, and we live this beautiful life. So this story shows that. So anyone who reads this book, who is an immigrant, who is a Canadian, who is a pioneer, who lives in the wild, wild West, will understand the challenges, the difficulties, and the sacrifices that people make, like Harnam Singh Hari.
Yeah, it speaks a lot to the human experience to talk about that constant dance between belonging and then being an outsider,
goodness,
belonging, being an
always.
outsider.
Right.
And sometimes it happens because people are full of contradictions, where sometimes you make it in.
Right.
And then you ask yourself, well, now I want to stand out.
Right, right.
So you're back to it.
Yeah.
You're back to a dance.
And people ask you, where are you from, right? I always say my mother's womb, because we don't choose where we are born. We are born, and then some of us are lucky. We are in countries that are successful, and some of us are challenged to be born in countries that have so much problems or situations or war.
A lot of challenges, yeah.
But everybody just wants to be happy and wants to live, and we want the best for ourselves and our children, right? Your mother wants the best for you. It doesn't matter where you end up, but where you end up is then, as you say, you give your best. So that's the dance that continues.
We've talked about the novel that you wrote, your children's book. What about these pile of books over here? What have you done aside from writing?
Yes.
I remember you told me that you've been an editor as well.
Right. So I am a lucky editor of the International Human Rights Art Movement in New York. And I have edited 2 of the anthologies, and this is a beautiful one, Heart, Hope and Land. It's Indigenous Voices in Canada. So we put the call out, and Indigenous writers sent their works in. We edited them, and the International Human Rights Art Movement, which is a world organization, they have their books go all over. So our Indigenous stories are all over. And I have novels, I have articles and poems. This is from Singapore. This is the best Asian short story. This is Growing Up Indian in Singapore. I'm just so excited
to see all this,
Yes.
you've taken a part in creating all of this.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, when it comes to your editing work, what do you look for when you're editing a book?
So for the International Human Rights Art Movement in New York, I have been a selector of, I've been the final judge for the spoken word contest and for African stories from all over the world. And it is the most difficult thing to do. I get 100 submissions and I only have to choose 10. It is an impossible task. So when I get rejected, I now understand it's not personal. So if I've chosen a story about women's lives, I can't have all of them be about women. I have to have LGBTQ, I have to have about politics, I have to have a man's story. And 100 of them, most of them are equally good. So that's what I learned about being an editor and a judge. But in editing books, luckily, I teach university writing. So I know about commas, I know about fixing things, about word choice. My experiences and my background are so useful, even when I write my own novel. But you know what? If you are not, it's okay. You can get an editor. Not very cheap, but you can write your story. You can get an editor to help you develop your story, edit your book, and do the final polishing as well. Just don't use AI, please. If you're going to write, I obviously am a firm believer of writing from your heart and soul, and AI doesn't do that. No harm to anyone who wants to do it. Do what makes you happy, but what makes me happy is to have my own authentic voice, and that's what I promote in the classroom as well.
When you were writing your book, and we're talking about structure, what made you want to write it in, there's a certain word for it, but it escapes me,
Epistolary.
epistolary
Yeah.
structure.
Letter writing.
It reminds me a bit of Dracula. If you've ever read Dracula,
no.
it's written like that.
Right.
It was, I'm not sure if it was revolutionary for its time, because I keep finding out that things that were new were actually really old. But Dracula is written in that way, in the way where it's just written through letters and letters and letters. And it kind of builds suspense through that horror.
It's interesting, when I was a literature student, we would read about how Keats and Pope, and they would write letters to each other as authors themselves. So I had that at the back of my mind. Also, I didn't know anything about writing. So when I was in this mentorship under Rita Van Herk, I had 3 months to come up with something. And people know the story. They know I panicked. I got frightened. I came up with the idea. I brainstormed with my daughter the night before, and I said, letters, I'm going to write letters. And they go, good, good. What letters are going to be? I'm going to go, letters to Singapore. And so Rita Van Herk, when I met her, I was really scared, because she's a brilliant writer in Calgary. She just retired from the University of Calgary. She has a host of books. Such a kind and compassionate mentor. And she listened to my idea. She said, I love it. What are you going to do? She said, send me 20 pages every 2 weeks. And that's when I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to write, because I really didn't know what to do. So it was an experiment. And she said, write the first letter. So I wrote the first letter, and then it made sense. Obviously, when you write a letter, you get a letter back, right? So I had to pick mom, sister, Chinese friend, South Indian friend. So, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 4 letters for sure. Then they write back, now I have 8 letters. Now they write and they tell me their life, now I have 12. So I think it became a natural progression. And I didn't know what the outcome would be. It would either have bombed, or it would be, what the heck is this? And I'm lucky that people say they really like the letters and eavesdropping and reading and the women telling their own stories. And what I like about it is that when you are reading someone's letters, if you read my letter, it is my heart and soul. You are reading my secrets, right? So then the story will come from that, and that I can tell you what is innermost in my life. So I am so fortunate that that worked out.
I want to touch a little bit on your Toastmaster skills. How did that come about? How did that journey come about? How did you decide to go along that journey?
Best thing I ever did. When I first came to Calgary many years ago, I did not have the confidence to speak up in class, to speak out loud. I sounded different. I was different. And when I would say something, people would look at me and go, are you from Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq? They would always question me. And that made me even more silent. So I thought one day, just one day, and a friend invited me to a Toastmasters club. And I said, no, this is a really weird sounding club. And she said, there's going to be free food. I said, I'm coming. So that was the beginning journey. And then I realized in Toastmasters, when you go there, you give presentations, you are evaluator, you take time, you are the chairperson. So you're learning amazing skills that give you confidence. Then I realized there were contests and competitions you could take part in, and I became hooked. I lost so many of them, and I won a handful of them, and I made it all the way to world stage, where you have 100 Toastmasters from around the world. It's the World International Speech Contest. And in 2017, it was in Vancouver. And I was on stage and I spoke. And it was just such a personal journey. That quiet girl in university who wouldn't speak, standing on world stage, sharing my story. So it was redemption. So things I do for myself. It's my personal hero quest and journey to take myself to the next level. And that Toastmaster experience made me realize I could write creative nonfiction because I had to write all those speeches. And so I won 4 table topics contests at district level, all of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And every time that happened, it gave me more strength and power to believe in myself. Then I wrote the books. Then from the books, I was interviewed on CBC. I'm being interviewed. Every time that happens, I gain a footing for myself, for my journey. So Toastmasters changed my life in beautiful ways. Then I got selected to give 2 TEDx talks in February and March this year for Western University and McMaster University.
Yeah.
If not for Toastmaster, no chance in heck. So the journey seems to, when I look back, they all make sense. But while I was going through it, I don't want to go to Toastmasters. I'm not good enough. I can't write. What the heck am I going to do? Who's going to read my book? But I'm realizing just one step at a time. And it's 2025. And I have these to show what happened. What happened is that I finally followed my passion and my heart. I think when you do that, doors open, things happen. And if they don't, you still can be very happy because the success that you have is the success of your inside life coming to life outside of you and confirming that you are alive. And I love that part.
Kelly, I've had a pleasure having you here talking about literature, learning about your journey, talking about Toastmastering and the different achievements that you've been able to be a part of. Thank you so much for taking the time to be part of the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And for you, for your stories and what you do, important things, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, and that wraps up another episode of StoryHive On Location Calgary. If you've got a story and want to be featured, don't forget to scan the QR code and apply to be a guest on our show. Stay tuned. See you next time.